Parents, I want you to stop whatever you're doing just for a brief moment. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw. Please take a long, deep, intentional breath. If you're listening to the podcast in your car in the driveway because you can't face walking back into the house just yet, or if you're listening with headphones on late at night while your household sleeps, or staring at the ceiling with a knot of absolute terror in your stomach, I want you to know that I see you. I know the heavy, suffocating weight that you're carrying. If you have a teenage son who has been diagnosed with ADHD, or maybe you just strongly suspect that his brain works a bit differently, and lately you've noticed a shift. Maybe he's spending hours upon hours locked in his room, retreat style, completely glued to his device. Maybe he becomes inexplicably angry, defensive, or even verbally aggressive the moment that you ask him to put his phone down for dinner. Or perhaps you're watching his grades plummet, his eye contact vanish, and the bright, sweet boy that you used to know pull away in a cold, isolated shell. I need you to hear me clearly. You're not a bad parent, and your son is not a bad kid. What you might actually be witnessing is a quiet, agonizing, hidden struggle with pornography. But here is the critical piece that almost every parent misses: that same ADHD neurological wiring that makes it incredibly hard for him to focus on algebra or to remember to bring his laundry downstairs. Well, that exact same wiring is what is quietly fueling this compulsive behavior. It's not a character flaw. It's not a sign of moral corruption or malicious defiance. It is a profound systemic collision of neurobiology meeting highly addictive modern digital technology in an absolute perfect storm. The inherent impulsivity of ADHD, the biological craving for rapid fire dopamine hits, the massive struggle to delay gratification, it all lines up perfectly to make online pornography exceptionally uniquely appealing to an ADHD brain. Hi, parents. I'm Matt Bulkley, a licensed psychotherapist and the host of Parent Guide. For years, I've sat in my clinic with families who look exactly like yours, parents who walk through my door absolutely blindsided, paralyzed by fear, drowning in shame, and completely unsure where to turn or how to fix their broken home. Today, we are stripping away the secrets. We're going to go deep into the actual neurobiology, the real life stories from my practice, the hidden warning signs, and most importantly, the practical, shame-free, actionable steps that you can start taking tonight to help your son reclaim his attention, his self-worth, and his future. This episode is it's not fear-mongering. It's about deep, empathetic understanding and empowering parenting action. If you've tuned in because you're terrified for your son, know this: early compassionate intervention changes absolutely everything. We're going to spend some real time together today unpacking this layer by layer. If you're new to our community, please take a moment, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. You need steady stream of guidance that actually works, rooted in clinical truth, not judgment. So let's dive in together. Let's start right at the foundation, but let's look at this through a lens that you probably haven't heard from your school counselor or even your pediatrician. When most people hear the term ADHD, they immediately picture little kid who can't sit still in his chair, or teenager who constantly loses his homework. But ADHD is so much broader, deeper, and more complex than simple hyperactivity or distractibility. At its absolute core, especially when we're talking about teenage boys, ADHD is an executive functioning deficit. It is a structural difference in how the brain plans, self-regulates, evaluates risk, and manages impulse control. So I want you to think about the prefrontal cortex for a moment. This is front part of the brain right behind the forehead. And in neurobehavioral terms, we call it the brakes of the human machine. It's the part of the brain that says, hey, if you do this right now, there will be a negative consequence in 2 hours. So let's stop. And now in a typically developing teenager, that prefrontal cortex is already highly immature. It doesn't actually fully develop until a person reaches their mid-20s. But in a teen with ADHD, that development can be delayed by an additional 3 to 5 years, or it operates with significantly less efficiency. So what does that actually mean for your son? Well, it means his brain's emotional and reward centers, the accelerator pedal, so to speak, are screaming at maximum volume while his biological brakes are barely functioning. When his reward center lights up, it demands instant stimulation. It doesn't just want it, it feels an existential neurological need for it. And then enter modern porn. Pornography today it's not the print magazines of 30 years ago. It's an algorithmic, high definition, infinitely novel super stimulus engineered to do one specific thing, and that is exploit human neurobiology. It delivers instant novelty, rapidly escalating intensity, and absolutely zero delay. In one single tap of a thumb, and your son's ADHD brain is flooded with a massive, catastrophic surge of dopamine, the neurochemical responsible for tracking reward and motivation. And we're talking about a chemical spike that is far more powerful, concentrated, and immediate than almost any healthy real world activity could ever hope to provide. And for a neurotypical teenager, natural curiosity might lead them to look at porn occasionally, feel a bit of guilt, and then move on with their day. For them, the brakes, so to speak, the brakes work well enough to regulate the behavior. But for a teenager with ADHD impulsivity, that cycle can become, but for a teenager with ADHD impulsivity, that cycle can become deeply compulsive and addictive at a terrifying speed. Why? Well, because their brain biologically struggles to find the pause button. When your son is sitting in front of that screen, he isn't necessarily searching for sexual content out of pure malice or perversion at first. What he is actually doing is desperately self-medicating. He's seeking immediate chemical relief from the exhausting, chaotic, racing thoughts in his head. He's seeking relief from the intense academic boredom, or from chronic anxiety, or from the painful sting of social rejection that he experienced at school that afternoon. And pornography becomes the path of least resistance. It's the fastest, the most reliable escape route from emotional pain available in the modern world. I want you to burn this visual image into your mind as a parent. Your teenager's brain is essentially a high-performance sports car with completely faulty brakes. And modern technology has handed him the keys to a digital superhighway with absolute no speed limits, no police, and no roadblocks. So when you look at it through that biological lens, the anger you feel starts to dissolve, doesn't it? Because it gets replaced with something much more powerful, and that is clinical clarity and deep parental compassion. This is the hidden connection that we have to understand if we want to save our boys. Well, parents, let's look closer at the actual hard science here, because I never want you to think this is just my clinical opinion. We need to look at how dopamine regulation, or rather dysregulation, works inside your son's nervous system. In a brain with ADHD, there is a baseline deficiency in how dopamine is produced, released, and then reabsorbed. So effectively, an ADHD brain is operating in a constant state of chemical starvation. It's perpetually scanning the environment, asking, where can I get a spark? Where can I get enough stimulation just to bring me up to a normal functional baseline of alertness? Because of this constant deficit, when an ADHD brain encounters a supernormal stimulus like internet porn, which offers endless variety, shocking novelty, and immediate gratification, well, it completely hijacks the mesolimbic pathway. This is the primary reward circuit in the brain, that the exact same neural pathway involved in severe chemical dependencies like substance abuse. And the global scientific community is sounding the alarm on this exact intersection. So I want to share a few critical recent studies that back this up, so that you can feel grounded in absolute facts as you deal with the situations in your home. So Key Mediators 2021, it's a landmark study that was published in the journal Behavioral Addictions, looked specifically at this link. The researchers discovered that individuals with pronounced ADHD symptoms were significantly more likely to develop compulsive problematic pornography use. But here was the golden nugget of that study, is that they identified impulsivity as the absolute key mediator. So it means it's not just a high sex drive driving the behavior. It is the specific neurological inability to inhibit the impulse once the thought enters the mind. A study conducted by Prevera and colleagues, published in Frontiers in Psychiatry, linked the rapid rise of internet porn consumption, specifically in young males with ADHD, to compulsive sexual behavior. What they uncovered was heartbreaking, but vital. These young men were utilizing pornography predominantly as an emotional mood regulator. They were using it to artificially blunt the sharp, painful edges of emotional dysregulation. So in other words, the intense highs and lows that naturally accompany ADHD. Next, let's go to negative reinforcement concept. So, a 2022 study by Zhang and his research team highlighted the concept of negative reinforcement. In behavioral psychology, negative reinforcement means a behavior is repeated because it takes away something painful. And their data showed that ADHD teens use porn to rapidly escape feelings of intense loneliness, peer rejection, or overwhelming academic failure. The screen acts as an emotional anesthetic. And then finally, let's talk about the concept of vulnerability at a younger age. This is a recent study from last year, 2025. Clinical reviews from the ADD Resource Center confirm actually a quite a terrifying trend. Teens with ADHD are becoming vulnerable to this cycle at significantly younger ages than ever before. Because smartphones are placed in kids' hands earlier, the combination of unchecked, unmonitored digital access mixed with underdeveloped neurological self-control creates a rapid, aggressive escalation from casual viewing to severe compulsion. So parents, I share this heavy data with you not to make you feel hopeless, but to completely strip away the concept of blame or shame. And to clarify, ADHD does not cause porn addiction in a vacuum, but it acts as a massive, highly flammable accelerant. It dramatically, mathematically raises the risk profile for your son. So when you understand that this is a neurological vulnerability, your parenting strategy changes. You stop reacting with screaming matches, grounding him for 6 months, or labeling him a liar. You stop using punitive punishment that only increases his shame and drives him deeper into the addiction. And you start responding with precise, strategic, medical, and psychological compassion. Well, parents, to help you see how this plays out in real life, I want to invite you into my therapy office. And of course, names and identifying details have been completely changed to protect the privacy of these families, but their struggles are completely real. And I want you to listen closely because you will likely hear echoes of your own son in some of these scenarios. So let's start with scenario one. Let's talk about Alex. Alex came to see me when he was 16, and he had combined type ADHD, meaning he had both the physical restlessness and the intense mental distractibility. He was diagnosed quite young, but as he hit high school, his parents noticed that he started retreating. They saw that his late night phone use is not as completely normal teen behavior. So in other words, after all, well, every kid is on their phone, right? But because of Alex's ADHD impulsivity, once he opened a browser tab late at night, his brain completely locked on. He fell into what we call hyperfocus. Stopping was biological impossible for him in those moments. 2 to 3 hours of viewing every single night became his secret reality. And predictably, his grades plummeted from A's and B's to failing grades. And at home, at dinner, he became raw, incredibly irritable, totally withdrawn. So when I finally started meeting with Alex in therapy, he broke down sobbing. So, he said, "Matt, I don't even want to look at it anymore, but my brain won't shut up. At night, my brain is racing so fast with everything that I messed up during the day that porn is really the only thing that turns off the noise. It makes me feel powerful for a few minutes when the rest of my life feels like a total failure." Well, what do we do? We didn't punish Alex. We shifted the strategy completely. We worked closely with his doctor to carefully adjust his ADHD medications just to ensure it wasn't wearing off too early in the evening, leaving him vulnerable. And then we implemented a rigid structural screen boundaries. So things like no devices in the room after 9 o'clock, period. And we taught some cognitive behavioral therapy technique, CBT, specifically tailored for impulse control. And most importantly, we helped his parents to rebuild an open, shame-free line of communication. And 2 years later, today, Alex is a completely different kid. He's actively in recovery. His grades have rebounded, and he's actually present, laughs and talks with his parents. Scenario two, Jordan, who's 15, And Jordan had more of what we refer to as an inattentive ADHD, the kind that often gets missed because these kids aren't disruptive at school or in class. They're just quietly daydreaming or checked out. And because girls and inattentive boys frequently go unnoticed, his internal suffering accumulated for years. He at school he felt entirely alone and isolated, and he used pornography as really as as a explicit coping mechanism to escape serious social anxiety and feelings of loneliness. And because of his inattentive ADHD, once his mind wandered to a sexual thought, shifting his attention away from that urge and redirecting it to something productive, it felt like trying to move a mountain. And his parents came to me because they noticed an alarming amount of secrecy, oftentimes locked doors and massive volatile mood swings whenever they tried to engage him. And with Jordan, really the therapeutic focus was on anxiety management. We taught him a tool called the 10-minute delay technique, which when a powerful neurochemical urge hit him, we didn't just tell him to use willpower. It was because willpower doesn't work well, especially in an ADHD brain. But instead, we worked on the idea that, well, you can look at it if you want to, but you have to wait exactly 10 minutes and literally set a timer on your watch. And during those 10 minutes, you have to engage in an active physical alternative that creates natural dopamine. And for Jordan, it was shooting basketball hoops in the driveway, putting on some high energy music. And this, well, it helped him find natural, healthy avenues for dopamine, and which eventually turned into participation in competitive sports. And today, Jordan is also thriving in extracurricular activities. He's managing his anxiety, and he's actively opening up to his parents without that wall of secrecy. And finally, Sam. Let's talk about Sam. There's Sam was 14, dealing with severe, highly volatile ADHD impulsivity. In Sam's house, device limits were introduced far too late, and by the time that his parents realized what was happening, pornography had become his default automatic coping mechanism for literally any form of discomfort, boredom, sadness, anger, fatigue. The home life had devolved into complete chaos. There were screamed insults, holes punched in drywall, broken promises, constant lying. Sam would steal devices, find hidden Wi-Fi networks, and really completely bypass every parental control that his desperate parents put in place. And unfortunately, his family had reached a breaking point where traditional once-a-week outpatient therapy simply wasn't enough to break the entrenched neurological cycle. The environment at home was just simply ineffective and too reactive. So in Sam's case, recommended a higher level of clinical intervention, and that's Star Guides Wilderness Therapy. And Star Guides is a highly specialized, structured, nature-based program designed specifically for teen boys navigating compulsive behavior addictions and neurodevelopmental challenges like ADHD. And an ADHD brain in crisis desperately needs a complete, total, long-term digital detox. And this combined with intense external structure, something that's almost impossible for a traumatized, exhausted parent to provide at home while working and managing a household. And so Star Guides took Sam completely out of this high stimulus digital environment and placed him in the wilderness where his nervous system could finally reset. Away from screens, program provided intensive expert clinical care that Sam needed to face his trauma and to build real self-regulation skills, real coping skills, while simultaneously working with his parents to completely restructure the family dynamics. And here, just about a month ago, Sam's parents, at the conclusion of his treatment, sat in my office, tears in their eyes. But this time, they were tears of profound relief. They described a completely transformed kid, respectful, deeply engaged, accountable, and actually hopeful about his own future. So parents, I share these three distinct cases with you for one reason. It's just simply to show you that no matter how dark, chaotic, or far gone that your son's situation feels right now, there is real proven hope when we choose to act with deep clinical understanding instead of reactive anger. Well, parents, I want to give you a checklist here. If you are sitting there wondering, is this actually happening to my son, or am I just being paranoid? Am I overreacting? I want you to look for some specific overlapping behavioral signs. Because of how ADHD interacts with pornography, these signs present in a fairly distinct pattern. So excessive guarded device isolation. Look for an abrupt or extreme increase in alone time spent on devices, particularly late at night after the rest of the house has gone to sleep. And if he's taking his phone into the bathroom for 45 minutes at a time, or if his bedroom door constantly, well, pay attention to that. Next would be the tech withdrawal rage. So pay close attention to how he reacts when you naturally limit his devices or when the Wi-Fi goes down. If he exhibits intense irritability, unprovoked anger, emotional volatile outbursts, or deep withdrawal that seems wildly disproportionate to simply losing a video game, well, I mean, his brain is likely experiencing a literal drop in dopamine because the supply chain has been cut. Things like academic and social collapse. Watch for sudden, unexplained decline in academic performance, missing assignments, or total loss of interest in hobbies, sports, real world friends that he used to like to hang out with. The high stimulus screen is making real life rewards feel boring and unappealing by comparison. And another one would be advanced digital secrecy. This would be watching his physical behavior around screens. Does he rapidly tilt his phone away when you walk into the room? Is he constantly deleting his browser history? Is he using incognito private browsing modes or utilizing a hidden vault or a ghost app disguised as a calculator? And finally, the broken promise cycle. If you've already confronted him and he's made tearful promises to stop, but you keep catching him breaking those boundaries over and over, despite severe consequences. Remember, this isn't necessarily because he doesn't respect you. It is because his ADHD impulsivity is completely overriding his rational mind in the moment of temptation. So if several of these signs match your son's current behavior, then I need you to lean in. Do not panic and do not launch an aggressive interrogation tonight, but instead, I want you to approach him gently in a calm, low stress moment, maybe while driving in the car or sitting on the back porch, and look him in the eyes and use a script, something like, "Hey, buddy, I've noticed you seem really stressed, tired, and carrying a lot of weight lately. I want you to know that I love you unconditionally, no matter what is going on, no matter what you're struggling with. I'm here to help you solve it completely without judgment or punishment. You're safe with me." And that simple, non-threatening entry point can be the lifeline that gives an ADHD teen boy the courage to finally drop the mask of secrecy. All right, parents. Well, let's talk about your direct, actionable battle plan. We know the neurobiology, we know the science, we know the signs. Now, what do we actually do when the podcast ends? So there are 4 foundational pillars that I cover constantly to rebuild here. So number 1, the open, radical, shame-free communication. You must initiate regular, ongoing, factual conversations about this. Take the sex and the morality out of it for a moment and explain the neurobiology of ADHD and impulsivity to him completely factually. So something like, your brain is naturally hungry for dopamine, and these tech companies have designed a product that tricks your nervous system. It's a biological trap, and I'm going to help you get your brain back. So when you remove the moral shame, you remove his need to lie to you. Number 2, concrete structural boundaries. So an ADHD brain cannot self-regulate without external physical structures in place. So you cannot rely on his willpower. This means implementing consistent screen rules. So all devices charge in the kitchen overnight, no exceptions, and utilize thoughtful, robust parental control software at the router level. But remember, boundaries can't just be about taking things away. You must aggressively schedule alternative high dopamine offline activities. So structured exercise, real world social connection, outdoor adventures, hands-on hobbies, all of things that give his brain a natural, healthy chemical reward. Number 3, active self-regulation training. So we have to teach our boys how to handle discomfort, teach them mindfulness, teach them the 10-minute delay. Teach them urge surfing, which be the psychological skill of noticing a powerful craving, acknowledging it without acting on it, and then breathing through it until the wave naturally passes. So prioritizing his baseline physiological health, things like structured sleep hygiene, a solid protein-rich nutrition, and daily heavy physical movement. A physically exhausted, sleep-deprived ADHD brain has zero defense mechanisms against an impulse. And then finally, seek specialized professional support So don't try to white knuckle this alone in your living room. Find a licensed clinician who is explicitly experienced in treating both ADHD and behavioral process addictions. And we know cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, are exceptionally effective here. And additionally, have a professional review his current ADHD medical management to ensure that his neurological baseline is properly supported throughout, especially the evening hours. Well, parents, now, because I know how incredibly overwhelming it is to try and design all of this from scratch while you're in the middle of a family crisis, have some resources specifically to help you with this. So first, highly recommend checking out the Recovery Toolbox for Teens. It's a fully comprehensive, structured, evidence-based digital system designed specifically for parents and teens to walk through together at home or working collaboratively with an outpatient clinician. Contains practical bite-sized workbooks, 3 workbooks that won't lose an ADHD teen's attention, specifically written and designed for teens on their level, guided communication scripts for you as parents, and the parent guide for those tough conversations, daily tracking practices that will help to build real and lasting psychological skills. And it really does take the guesswork out of recovery, and it gives you a clear roadmap to recovery. However, if you're listening to this today and you feel like the things in your home have already spiraled completely out of control, if there are major safety concerns, severe emotional withdrawal, constant explosive aggression, or if outpatient therapy has repeatedly failed to make a dent, then please look into Starguide's Wilderness Therapy. As a clinician, I've seen the immersive wilderness-based intervention completely save lives. It provides profound long-term digital reset, physical safety, and intensive external structure that a highly traumatized ADHD brain desperately needs to heal. And it gives your son the space to break the chemical addiction entirely while simultaneously providing you as parents with intensive training needed to establish healthy family ecosystem at home. And for so many families that I've worked with, it has been the definitive turning point that outpatient care just couldn't have achieved. So the links to both Recovery Toolbox for Teens and Star Guides in the show notes on this episode. And so use them. They're there to support you. And always remember this fundamental truth. Your son's pornography use is almost never the actual root problem. It is a loud, painful system of a deeper unmet neurological and emotional needs for things like real connection, for confidence, for escape, for functional coping skills. And our job as parents isn't just to stop the behavior, but is to help them build a life where they don't need the escape. So parents, you can handle this. You have the knowledge now. You have the tools. Taking early, decisive, compassionate action right now is going to prevent years of unnecessary suffering for your son and your family. And remember, you're not walking this dark road alone. There's an entire community of parents walking right alongside you. Reach out. Happy to hear from you. Drop me what your biggest takeaway was, what your deepest fear is, or if there's any questions that you have, be in contact. Parents, if this episode brought you even a shred of peace or clarity, share it with another parent that might need it. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast for weekly guidance, support, strategies, tips, research, and make sure to grab those the links in the show notes for Recovery Toolbox for Teens and Star Guides. Parents, you're doing the hardest, most important work on the face of the planet. You're fighting for your teen son's soul. So please take care of your own heart too. And thanks for trusting me. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you right back here in the next episode. You've got this. Parents, keep moving forward.